There is something happening in the realm of the Spirit right now, and it is not by accident that you are here. Heaven did not stumble across your afternoon or your evening by chance. The God who numbered the hairs on your head, the God who knit you together in secret and called you by name before the foundations of the earth were laid. He has been watching the road you have been walking. He has seen every detour, every closed door, every silent night where you lay awake wondering if any of it meant anything. And today, in this moment, He has not sent you a gentle suggestion. He has not whispered a polite reminder. He has issued a command, and that command is this: shut your mouth. Before you take another step, before you make another move, before you tell another person what you are planning, what you are praying for, what you are believing God to do, He is asking you to stop, to be still, to close the door on the noise and listen to what heaven is trying to say over your life right now. You are not like the rest. You were never meant to blend into the background of ordinary living. There is a calling on your life so significant, so specific, so terrifyingly powerful that darkness itself has spent years trying to convince you that you imagined it. The enemy does not waste arrows on people who pose no threat. The fact that you have faced the opposition you have faced, the fact that you have been misunderstood, overlooked, underestimated, and pushed to the edges of rooms where you should have been seated at the table, that is not evidence that God forgot you. That is evidence that something inside you is dangerous to the kingdom of darkness, and it has been trying to silence you in the wrong way before God could silence you in the right way. Because there is a silence that destroys you, and there is a silence that prepares you for glory. There is a silence that comes from being broken down, and there is a silence that comes from being set apart. And what God is calling you into right now is not the silence of defeat. It is the silence of the sacred. It is the silence of a warrior who has been pulled aside by the commander and told, "Not yet. Stay close. Listen. Trust me." The book of Proverbs, chapter 17, verse 28 says this: "Even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue." Heaven has been waiting for you to understand that the most powerful thing you can do in this season is not to announce, not to argue, not to explain yourself, not to defend what God placed in you. The most powerful thing you can do right now is to close your mouth and let God move. There are words you have spoken over your own life that you did not realize were building walls. There are conversations you have had, declarations you have made out of frustration, out of fear, out of exhaustion, that have given the enemy legal language to work with. And God, in His mercy, God, in His devastating love for you, is pulling you aside right now, not to condemn, but to recalibrate you. He is saying, "I am deadly serious about this. I need you to trust me enough to be quiet. You have carried so much. You have fought battles that no one witnessed. You have cried in rooms where no one came. You have prayed prayers that felt like they dissolved into the ceiling, and you kept going anyway. That faithfulness has not been invisible. Every tear you offered in the dark was collected. Every night you chose to stay when you could have walked away was recorded. And now God is not punishing you with silence. He is protecting you with it. This is a divine moment. This is not the algorithm, and this is not coincidence. This is the finger of God pointing directly at you and saying, "You are the one I am talking to right now. You are the one I need to reach before the next chapter begins." Because what is coming for your life, what God has been constructing in the hidden places, what He has been building behind the scenes, while you were wondering if anything was happening at all, it is bigger than what your words can currently contain. And if you speak it too soon, if you show it to the wrong people too early, If you let pride or impatience pull the curtain back before God gives the signal, you risk losing the very thing heaven has been guarding for you. So right now, in this sacred space, God is asking you to make a decision, not next week, not after the situation changes. Right now, He is asking you to surrender your mouth, your plans, your timeline, and your need to be understood, and to say, God, I trust you more than I trust my own voice. If you feel that in your spirit, if something in you recognized this message the moment it began, if you know this word was meant for you today, then stop scrolling and type 333 in the comments right now. That number is your declaration. It is your way of saying, I am here, I am listening, and I am ready for what God is about to do. Let the people beside you in this community see your name. Let heaven record your response. And if this message is already stirring something in you, do not keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who is in a season where they cannot make sense of the silence around them. Like this video so that more chosen ones can find their way to this word. Subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you never miss what God is releasing through this channel. The link to go deeper, to sow a seed into this ministry and partner with what heaven is building here, is in the description below. And in the pinned comment, every act of generosity you offer is an act of faith, and God sees every seed planted in obedience. This is only the beginning of what God wants to say to you today. There is something God showed chosen ones long before the language of science ever caught up to explain it. You have always carried a frequency that others could not quite name. People have felt it when you walked into a room. They have sensed something different about you without being able to articulate what it was. Some were drawn to it, others were threatened by it. But that frequency, that invisible signal you have been carrying since before you understood what it meant, it is not your imagination. It is not spiritual metaphor. It is measurable, documentable, and real. Researchers in the field of neuroscience have spent decades trying to understand why certain individuals seem to access a level of clarity, creativity, and cognitive power that the average person cannot touch. And what they found, buried inside the data of some of the most rigorous brain studies ever conducted, is that the minds of people who operate at the highest levels of human potential share a specific pattern of brain activity. Scientists call it gamma wave activity. And what is remarkable, what stopped researchers in their tracks when they began to see the data clearly, is that this same pattern appears in the brains of people who describe deep spiritual experiences, moments of divine clarity, encounters with something greater than themselves. You were never strange. You were calibrated differently. Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years of his life trying to understand the human brain at a level most scientists never attempt. Trained in the traditions of some of the most rigorous academic and research institutions in the world, including work connected to programs at MIT and NASA, Dr. Rivers dedicated decades to one central question: why do some people seem to naturally access states of heightened awareness, creative flow, and sharp mental clarity, while others, regardless of effort or intention, cannot seem to break through the fog? What he discovered changed everything he thought he knew. The brain operates on frequencies. Just like a radio receiver, it can be tuned. And the vast majority of adults, through the accumulated weight of stress, distraction, routine, and the relentless noise of modern life, have drifted far from the frequencies they were designed to operate on. In childhood, the brain spends enormous amounts of time in what is called theta wave activity, a state between 4 and 8 cycles per second that is directly associated with deep learning, creative insight, intuitive knowing, and rapid absorption of new information. Watch a child discover something for the first time, and you are watching a theta-dominant brain doing exactly what it was built to do. But something happens as we age. The world begins to press in. Responsibilities, anxieties, failures, and the constant demand to perform push the adult brain out of theta and into survival frequencies. And that gateway, that sacred corridor between where most people live mentally and where the chosen ones operate, begins to close. Now, here is where the science meets the sacred. In Section 1, you were called into a posture of silence. You were asked to close your mouth, to stop the outward noise, and to trust that God was working in what felt like stillness. That invitation was not arbitrary, because it is in that state of intentional, surrendered quiet that your brain becomes most receptive to the frequencies it was originally designed to carry. The silence was not just spiritual instruction, it was preparation. God was quieting the external so that something internal could be activated. Dr. Rivers found that the transition from the survival frequencies most adults are trapped into the theta and gamma states associated with peak mental and spiritual clarity does not require years of meditation practice. It does not require special gifts or extraordinary discipline. When the brain is given the right acoustic signal, a precisely engineered combination of binaural beats and isochronic tones calibrated to guide the mind toward theta and gamma activity, the shift can begin in as few as 7 minutes. 7 minutes. You read in Section 1 that God was calling you into a posture of sacred silence. Now, you understand why that number kept returning. 7 minutes of intentional stillness, paired with the right frequency, is enough to begin rewiring the way your brain accesses clarity, creativity, memory, and presence. This is not guesswork. This is the result of more than 3,000 days of documented research. The tool that Dr. Rivers developed from this research is called the Genius Wave. It is a 7-minute audio track, delivered digitally, that you simply listen to through headphones or speakers once a day. No meditation training required, no special rituals, no complicated protocols. You press play, you allow the engineered frequency to do what it was designed to do, and you let your brain remember the state it was created to operate in. More than 19,000 people have already used the Genius Wave, and the results that have come back have been extraordinary. A woman who had spent over a year unable to focus, unable to sleep, unable to break through the mental fog that had settled over her life, began listening once a day for 3 weeks. She described it as the first time in over a year that she felt like herself again. A man in his late 40s who had watched opportunity after opportunity slip through his fingers said that within 30 days of daily use, he had landed a contract he had been pursuing for 2 years. Another woman said she had tried every productivity tool, every journaling method, every focus app available, and nothing reached the place that 7 minutes of the Genius Wave reached in the first week. These are not isolated stories. These are patterns. And the common thread running through all of them is this: when the brain is operating at the frequency it was designed for, life begins to open in ways that logic alone cannot explain. Now, you may be sitting with a thought right now that sounds something like this: $39 is not nothing. I have been burned before. I have spent money on things that promised transformation and delivered disappointment. I want to acknowledge that thought because it is valid. You have worked hard for what you have. You have every right to be careful about where you place your trust and your resources. But consider what you are actually weighing here. The regular price of the Genius Wave is $49. And through the link in the pinned comment below this video, for a limited time, you can access it today for just $39. One time, no subscription, No recurring charges, yours to keep, and it comes with a full 90-day money-back guarantee. That means you have 3 months to listen, to experience what happens when your brain begins to operate at the frequency it was built for. And if at any point in those 90 days you feel that it has not delivered real and meaningful change in your focus, your clarity, your creativity, your peace, you get every single dollar back. No questions, no hoops, no fight. $39, backed by 90 days of zero risk. The only thing you are gambling by trying it is the fog you have already been living in. But there is something you must know before you go looking for this on your own. Because the Genius Wave has been producing real results, there are counterfeit versions circulating on unauthorized platforms and websites. These are not the real product. They are not engineered to the specifications of Dr. Rivers' research. They will not deliver what the genuine audio is designed to do. And in some cases, they have caused confusion and disappointment for people who believed they were accessing the real thing. There is only one safe place to get the authentic Genius Wave, and that is through the single link found in the pinned comment directly. Do not search for it on other websites. Do not purchase from third-party sellers. The link in the pinned comment is the only verified, authorized access point. Protect your investment by going there, and nowhere else. And this matters right now more than it will tomorrow, because the $39 access price is not permanent. It is a limited window, available to those who move while this offer is active. When that window closes, the price returns to $49, and this specific arrangement ends. The chosen ones who act today are not acting from impulse. They are acting from discernment. They are recognizing that when provision and preparation arrive at the same moment, that is not coincidence. That is divine timing. The link is in the pinned comment. It is there right now, and so are you. You have been silenced in ways that were never meant to break you. There were seasons where your voice was taken from you, not by your own choosing, but by circumstances that arrived without warning and without mercy. Seasons where you spoke and no one listened. Seasons where you tried to explain what was happening inside you and the words came out wrong, or they came out right and still landed on deaf ears. Seasons where the silence around you felt less like peace and more like a prison, and you began to wonder if your voice carried any weight at all in this world. But God was doing something in every one of those seasons that your natural eyes could not perceive. He was not punishing you, He was positioning you. And the difference between those two things is everything. There is a pattern that runs through the lives of every person God has ever used in a significant way. And it is a pattern that the world rarely celebrates because it does not look like victory from the outside. It looks like waiting. It looks like confusion. It looks like a person standing still while everyone around them seems to be moving forward. It looks like a voice going quiet at the very moment it feels like it should be the loudest. And yet, inside that pattern, inside that uncomfortable and often painful stillness, God is performing some of the most precise and purposeful work He will ever do in a human life. The book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 20, carries one of the most penetrating commands in all of Scripture. It says this, "The Lord is in His holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before Him." Not some of the earth, not the people who feel like they have nothing important to say. All the earth, every voice, every plan, every declaration, every argument being rehearsed in the corridors of the human mind. Silence before Him. That verse is not a suggestion dressed in the language of command. It is a revelation of what happens in the presence of God when His purposes are being set in motion. The appropriate response to divine activity is not noise. It is not commentary. It is not the urge to fill every quiet moment with your own interpretation of what God is doing. The appropriate response is silence. A silence born not from indifference but from reverence. A silence that says, I know that you are God and I am not. And what you are building in this moment is far beyond what my words can add to or take away from. You have to understand what is at stake when you speak too soon. When God is constructing something sacred in your life, when He is laying foundations that are meant to hold the weight of everything He has called you to carry, your premature words are not neutral. They do not simply float away into the air and disappear. They land somewhere. They reach ears that were not ready to receive what God has not yet released. They invite opinions into spaces that were meant to be held sacred between you and heaven. And sometimes, without any malicious intent on anyone's part, the words of others, their doubt, their questions, their alternative perspectives on your calling, begin to erode the very thing God was building in the quiet. This is not a new phenomenon. This is ancient. This is a pattern woven into the stories of the most significant figures in the history of faith. Think about what happened when Joseph, a young man carrying a dream so large it would eventually reshape the trajectory of an entire nation, opened his mouth and told his brothers what he had seen in the night. The dream was real. The dream was from God. The dream would come to pass exactly as it was given. But the timing of the telling created an opening for jealousy, for betrayal, for years of suffering that might have been navigated differently had the dream been held a little longer in the sacred space of silence. God did not stop the dream from being fulfilled, but the road to fulfillment ran through a pit, through a prison, through years of waiting that Joseph could not have fully anticipated when he was speaking. And yet here is what is remarkable about Joseph's story, and here is what is remarkable about your story too. The silence that followed the speaking, the long years where Joseph had no platform, no audience, no ability to declare what God had shown him. Those years were not wasted. They were workshops. Every day in the pit was building something in Joseph's character that the palace could not have produced without the prison coming first. Every year of being unseen was cultivating a depth of wisdom, patience, and integrity that the position God had prepared for him would require. The silence was not the enemy of the dream. The silence was the furnace in which the dream was being refined. And God is doing the same thing in you right now. There is a version of you that exists on the other side of this season of sacred silence that you cannot fully imagine yet, because that version of you has been formed by what you are walking through right now. The clarity you are going to carry into your next chapter is being carved out by the very quietness that feels so heavy in this one. The authority that will be in your voice when God releases you to speak is being established right now by your willingness to hold your tongue when everything in you wants to announce, to defend, to declare, to be known. What does it take to truly shut your mouth when you are in pain? What does it take to stay silent when you have been misrepresented? When the story being told about you is not the true story? When you know things that could change the entire narrative, but God is asking you to leave them in His hands? It takes a level of trust that does not come naturally to the human heart. It takes a surrender that goes beyond discipline and enters into the territory of genuine faith. Faith that says, I believe that God is working even when I cannot see it. Faith that says, I trust that His silence on my behalf is more powerful than anything my words could produce on my own. Faith that says, I am willing to look like I have nothing to say because I know that God has everything to say. And when He speaks over my life, no voice that came before His will matter. This is the posture of the chosen one. not loud, not constantly announcing, not needing to be understood by every room they walk into. The chosen one has learned, sometimes through great suffering and sometimes through divine revelation, that there is a time to speak and a time to be still, and that the discernment between those two times is one of the most powerful whose spirit can give a surrendered heart. And here is what God wants you to know right now in this specific moment of your journey. The silence He is asking you to embrace is not going to last forever. There is a release coming. There is a moment on the other side of this season where heaven is going to open your mouth. And what comes out is going to carry a weight and a precision and a power that the old version of your voice never had access to. Because your words will have been purified by waiting. Your declarations will have been refined by trust. The things you speak in the next season will not be coming from a place of desperation or impatience or the need to be validated. They will be coming from a place of deep, settled, unshakable knowing. And that kind of voice changes rooms. That kind of voice shifts atmospheres. That kind of voice does not just speak into situations, it transforms them. But that voice is being formed right now, in the quiet, in the moments where you choose to close your mouth instead of opening it, in the days where you lay your plans down and say, God, I trust your timing more than I trust my own impulse. In the seasons where you look like you have nothing to say, and heaven is watching you with tremendous anticipation, because it knows what is being built in the silence that no one else can see yet. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not losing ground by being quiet. You are gaining everything that noise could never give you. The silence God is calling you into is not the silence of someone who has been defeated. It is the silence of someone who has discovered something that the noisy world around them has not yet found. It is the silence of a person who has tasted the difference between speaking from a place of anxiety and resting in a place of absolute trust. And once you have experienced that difference, once you have felt what it is like to hold your peace and watch God move on your behalf in ways that your own words would have cluttered and complicated, you never want to go back to the old way of living. But here is what most people never tell you about sacred silence. It is not passive. It is one of the most active, disciplined, and demanding postures a human being can take. Because every single day, the world is going to give you reasons to react. People are going to say things that deserve a response. Situations are going to arise that seem to demand your immediate commentary. Your own mind is going to generate arguments, explanations, and declarations that feel urgent and necessary and completely justified. And in the middle of all of that, God is going to ask you to do something that feels almost impossible. He is going to ask you to be still. That stillness is a weapon. Not in the way the world thinks of weapons, not loud, not aggressive, not designed to overpower, but a weapon in the truest spiritual sense. Because when you refuse to react, when you choose silence over defense, when you lay down your right to be understood and pick up, instead, the shield of trust, you remove from the enemy every tool he was planning to use against you in that moment. He cannot twist words you did not speak. He cannot use arguments you did not make. He cannot corrupt declarations you chose to leave in the hands of God rather than release prematurely into the atmosphere. The chosen one who masters this posture becomes almost untouchable in the spirit, not because nothing can reach them, but because they have learned to let God be the one who answers. And when God answers on your behalf, the response that comes is not contaminated by your wounded emotions, your limited perspective, or your human impatience. It is clean, it is complete, it is final. There is a practical dimension to this that is worth sitting with carefully. You already know, by now that your brain carries a frequency. You understood in the last section that the fog that settles over the mind of an adult who has been worn down by stress and survival is not your natural state. It is a departure from the frequency you were designed to operate on. And what is extraordinary, what begins to emerge when you look at the intersection of spiritual discipline and neuroscience, is that the practice of intentional silence, of choosing stillness over reaction, of creating space in your internal world before you respond to the external one, actually begins to shift the way your brain processes information. When you sit in stillness, when you breathe, when you choose not to fill every quiet moment with noise, your brain has the opportunity to move out of the high-stress frequencies that keep you locked in survival mode and begin to access the theta and gamma states where clarity, creativity, wisdom, and discernment actually live. The silence God is calling you into is not just spiritually powerful. It is neurologically transformative. And the 7-minute daily practice that the Genius Wave was designed to support is not separate from what God is doing in this season. It is an instrument that works with it, that gives your brain a daily opportunity to return to the frequency of the person you were created to be. If you have not yet looked into that, the link is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. $39, 90-day guarantee, and a tool that more than 19,000 people have already used to begin breaking through the fog. But right now, in this moment, what matters most is that you continue to lean into what God is building in you through this message. Because there is a depth to the silence He is calling you into that goes beyond the mental and into the truly sacred. It is a silence that reshapes your relationship with time. Most people live in a constant state of urgency, always feeling behind, always feeling like they need to catch up, always feeling like if they do not speak now, if they do not move now, the window will close and the opportunity will be gone. But the chosen one who has learned to be still before God begins to experience time differently, they begin to understand that divine timing is not subject to the same pressures that drive human urgency. That what God has ordained for your life cannot be stolen from you by your silence. That the breakthrough that belongs to you is not going to be awarded to someone else because you chose to wait on God rather than rushing ahead in your own strength. This is the rest that the scripture speaks of. Not laziness, not disengagement, not a passive drifting through life without intention or direction, yet a deep, intentional rest in the knowledge that the God who called you is also the God who is completing what He started in you. And your job, your one assignment in this season, is to trust Him enough to be quiet. Now, before we go any further together in this message, there is something that rests on my heart that I want to share with you gently and honestly. This channel exists for one reason, and that reason is you. Every message that goes out through this platform is crafted with the specific intention of reaching the chosen ones who are in seasons where they need a word, where they need to be reminded of who they are and what God has placed inside them. That is the mission. That has always been the mission. And I want you to know something. This channel is no longer monetized through YouTube. There are no advertisements funding what you are watching right now. What keeps these messages going out is something far more personal than an algorithm. It is the community of people who believe that this kind of content matters, who have been touched by these words, and who choose, out of their own free will and their own generosity, to help carry this work forward. If this message has reached you today, if something in these words has landed in a place that needed to be touched, and if you feel led to help this channel continue to create content that walks alongside the chosen ones in their most difficult seasons, You can find the donation link in the pinned comment below this video and in the description. Whatever you are able to give, whether it is small or whether it is significant, it is received with gratitude and it is used with purpose. Every contribution keeps this work alive and keeps these words reaching people who need them. And if you are in a season where you simply cannot give right now, please know that your presence here is already a gift. Watching this video to the end, leaving a comment below, sharing this message with one person in your life who you know is walking through a silent and difficult season. Those things matter more than you know. They tell the platform that this content is worth showing to more people. They extend the reach of this word beyond what any budget could accomplish. So if you have not already done so, take a moment right now to like this video, to share it with someone who needs it, and to subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so that you never miss what God is releasing here. You are part of something larger than a single video. You are part of a community of chosen ones who are learning together what it means to walk in divine purpose, to trust in divine timing, and to carry a frequency that this world desperately needs. And your engagement, your voice in the comments, your willingness to share is how that community grows and how more people find their way to the words that were meant for them. This message is not finished yet, and neither are you. There is an enemy who has studied you longer than you have studied yourself. He has watched the way you respond to pressure. He has cataloged the moments where your emotions override your discernment. He has taken careful note of every time your mouth moved before your spirit had a chance to catch up. And he has built an entire strategy around that one vulnerability. Not because you are weak, but because your voice, when it is aligned with heaven, is one of the most dangerous forces he has ever encountered, and he knows it, even when you do not. This is not a metaphor. This is not poetic language designed to make you feel significant. This is the operational reality of the spiritual war you are living inside of right now. The enemy of your soul does not waste sophisticated strategy on insignificant targets. The level of opposition that has been directed at your life, the specific nature of the attacks that have come against your peace, your relationships, your sense of identity, your ability to believe in what God has placed inside you, that level of precision tells you something important about who you are and what you carry. He is afraid of your aligned voice, so he has spent years trying to get you to use it in the wrong way. Think about the times in your life when you spoke out of pain and created consequences that took years to untangle. Think about the declarations you made in moments of frustration that became self-fulfilling in ways you never intended. Think about the conversations where you shared what God was doing in your life with people who were not spiritually positioned to receive it, and how the weight of their skepticism or their questions began to press against the tender thing that God was growing in you. None of those moments happened by accident. Every one of them was an invitation, carefully constructed, to get your voice working against your destiny rather than toward it. The enemy cannot create. He can only corrupt and redirect what already exists. And so he does not try to silence the chosen one by taking their voice away entirely. That would be too obvious. Instead, he does something far more subtle and far more damaging. He waits for the moments of vulnerability, the moments of pain, the moments of confusion or impatience or wounded pride, and he creates just enough pressure to make speaking feel not only justified but necessary. He manufactures urgency, amplifies offense. He whispers that if you do not say something right now, the moment will pass and justice will never come. And then he stands back and lets your own mouth do the work he could never do from the outside. This is why the command to shut your mouth is not just a spiritual nicety. It is a tactical instruction from a commander who can see the battlefield in ways that you cannot. When God says, "Be still," He is not asking you to be passive in the face of injustice. He is not telling you that your pain does not matter or that what was done to you was acceptable. He is telling you that He has seen what the enemy is trying to provoke you into, and He is asking you to deny the enemy that victory. He is asking you to trust that the God who sees everything, who misses nothing, account and settles every debt in His own time and in His own way, is more than capable of handling what you are facing without your words leading the charge. The book of 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 8 says this, "Be sober-minded and alert, because your adversary the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." A lion does not announce its presence when it is hunting. It waits, it watches, it studies the patterns of its target. It identifies the moment of greatest vulnerability, and it moves at exactly that moment with calculated precision. And the chosen one who does not understand this, who is not sober-minded and alert to the schemes being directed at them, will find themselves speaking at exactly the moment they should be silent, and the consequences of that speaking will feed the very thing that was trying to destroy them. But the chosen one who is awake, who has been trained by the Holy Spirit to recognize the manufactured urgency that the enemy injects into vulnerable moments, that person becomes extraordinarily difficult to trap because they have learned to pause. They have learned to take the impulse to speak and hold it up against the question, "Is this my wound talking, or is this the wisdom of God?" They have learned to distinguish between the voice of the Spirit, which is calm and clear and carries a kind of weightless certainty, and the voice of the enemy, which is urgent and loud and always arrives with a deadline attached. That discernment is not automatic. It is developed through seasons of practice, and often through the painful memory of times when you did not pause and you paid the price for it. But God does not waste even those experiences. Every time your unguarded words created a consequence you did not intend, He was not standing over you in condemnation. He was standing beside you in compassion, saying, "Now you know. Now you understand what it costs. Now let that understanding become the teacher that brings you into a new level of discipline and authority." Because there is an authority that comes on the other side of this learning that cannot be manufactured any other way. The person who has truly mastered the discipline of sacred silence, who has walked through the fire of unguarded words and come out on the other side with a new reverence for the weight of speech, that person carries something when they finally do speak that gets the attention of the room in a way that volume and frequency never could. Their words land differently. They carry precision that comes from the long practice of holding things back until the right moment. And when that moment comes, what is released is not just information or opinion. It is something closer to prophecy, something that carries the signature of heaven on it, because it has been tested and refined and held in trust until God Himself said, "Now, you are being prepared for that kind of speaking." That is what this season is about. Not permanent silence, not a life of never being heard, but a strategic, sacred, purposeful silence that is building in you the kind of voice that changes things when it finally speaks. And this preparation requires something of you that goes against every natural instinct you have been given as a human being. It requires you to be comfortable with being misunderstood for a season. Let people draw their own conclusions about you without rushing in to correct the record. To watch narratives form around your silence and choose trust over self-defense. To allow God to be your defense attorney, your publicist, and your advocate all at once, while you do the one thing that costs. More than any of it, you stay quiet and you wait. The waiting is not nothing. The waiting is everything. Because in the waiting, your roots are going down deep into soil that will hold you when the storms come against the fullness of what God is about to release in your life. The tree that sways the most dramatically in the storm is not the weakest tree. It is often the one whose roots have had the longest time to find their way down into the bedrock beneath the surface. And the storm that looks like it should be toppling you is actually the very thing proving to the watching world that you cannot be moved. You are being rooted right now. You are being anchored in a silence that the enemy cannot penetrate and the world cannot shake. And when you emerge from this season, you will not look like someone who was hiding. You will look like someone who was being prepared. Because that is exactly what this is. The chosen one does not speak to be heard. Chosen one waits until what they carry is ready to be released. And God is making you ready. There is a place that God takes his chosen ones that the rest of the world does not have a map for. It is not a geographic location. It cannot be found by searching for it or by following someone else's directions. It is a place that opens up inside your life when God decides that what he has placed in you has grown large enough to require a protected environment. And when the environment you have been living in can no longer contain what he is building without risking damage to it. Theologians have called it different things across the centuries. Some have called it the wilderness. Some have called it the cave. Some have called it the dark night of the soul. But whatever name you give it, the experience at its core is always the same. You find yourself hidden, concealed, set apart from the flow of ordinary life in a way that you did not choose and cannot fully explain. And it feels, from the inside, almost unbearable. Because the natural human desire is to be seen, to be known, to be in relationship and in community, and in the flow of things that matter. God put that desire in you. It is not sinful to want to be visible. It is not a character flaw to long for your contribution to be recognized, for your voice to be heard, for the things you carry inside you to find expression in the world. Those longings are woven into the fabric of what it means to be made in the image of a God who creates, who communicates, who desires relationship. So when God pulls you into a season of concealment, when he draws you back from the visibility you were beginning to reach for, it does not feel like protection. It feels like loss. But here is what God needs you to understand in this moment. The hiddenness is not rejection. The concealment is not punishment. The season where your name is not being spoken in the rooms you wanted to be in, where your gifts are not being celebrated in the spaces you prepared yourself for, where the opportunities seem to have dried up and the connections that felt so promising have gone quiet. That season is not evidence that God has changed his mind about you. It is evidence that he is serious about what he is building in you. Serious enough to protect it from being exposed before it is ready. Serious enough to risk your temporary confusion in order to secure your eternal purpose. Think about the way a seed works. When a farmer plants a seed in the ground, there is a period, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, where nothing visible is happening. The ground looks undisturbed. There is no evidence on the surface that anything significant is taking place beneath it. And if you did not know better, if you had not seen the process before and understood what it required, you might conclude that nothing was growing. You might begin to wonder if the seed was even viable. You might be tempted to dig it up just to check, to reassure yourself that something was actually happening down there in the dark. But the farmer who knows what he is doing does not dig up the seed to check on it. He waters it. He tends the soil around it. He protects it from things that would damage it before it has broken the surface. And he waits, not passively, not with indifference, but with the confident expectation of someone who has seen this process enough times to know that the absence of visible evidence is not the absence of activity. It is simply the nature of growth in its earliest and most critical stage. You are in that stage right now. What God has planted in you is alive. It is growing. It is developing root systems that will determine the stability of everything that comes after this season. And the concealment that feels like abandonment is actually the soil doing its most important work, pressing in around the seed from every direction, creating the pressure and the darkness and the moisture that growth requires. You are not buried, you are planted. And there is a difference between those. Two things that will become clear to you the moment you break the surface. But the breaking of the surface requires something from you in the meantime. It requires that you resist the urge to force your way into visibility before God opens the ground above you. It requires that you trust the process, even when the process is dark and disorienting, and nothing like what you imagined it would feel like to be in the center of God's will. It requires that you shut your mouth about what is happening in the ground, because what is growing there is too tender at this stage to survive the exposure that premature announcement would bring. This is the sacred assignment of the concealment season, not to give up, not to shrink back from who you are, but to hold what God has placed in you with open hands and closed lips, trusting that the one who planted it knows exactly when the conditions are right for it to emerge. There is something else that happens in the season of hiddenness that is worth understanding clearly. It is in the concealment that God does the deepest work of character formation in the life of the chosen one. Because character cannot be formed in the spotlight, visibility creates performance pressure. When people are watching, when there is an audience and a reputation at stake, the temptation to manage impressions rather than pursue genuine transformation is almost impossible to resist. But in the hidden season, when no one is watching, when there is no applause to chase and no reputation to protect, what you do with your time and your thoughts and your private choices reveals exactly who you are becoming. God watches those private moments with enormous attention. He sees what you do with the silence. He sees whether you use the hiddenness to go deeper into Him or to grow bitter about what you are not yet experiencing. He sees whether you could continue to cultivate what He placed in you, even when no one is there to validate the effort. And what He sees in those private moments is what He uses to determine when you are ready to be released from the concealment into the fullness of what He has been preparing you for. This is the season to go deeper, not wider. Deeper, deeper in your relationship with God, deeper in your understanding of who you are in Him, deeper in the practices and the disciplines and the habits that will sustain you when visibility returns and the demands on your life multiply, deeper in the stillness that your brain and your spirit both need in order to access the clarity and the creativity and the wisdom that your next season is going to require. And speaking of going deeper, if you have been following this message from the beginning and something in you has been stirring, if the word about frequency and brain states and the 7-minute practice has stayed with you, then know that the link in the pinned comment below is still there, and it is still carrying the $39 access price with the 90-day guarantee. The Genius Wave is a tool for the hidden season. It is something you can use in the quiet, in the private moments, in the daily discipline of returning your mind to the frequency it was designed to operate on. It is not a replacement for the spiritual work. It is something that runs alongside it, that supports the mental clarity you need to hear clearly, think clearly, and trust clearly in a season that can feel foggy and disorienting. The link is in the pinned comment. It is there whenever you are ready. And while you are in the comments, this community of chosen ones that gathers around these messages, this is something that genuinely moves my heart. You need to know that this channel exists purely because of the people who choose to show up here, who choose to engage, who choose to carry these words to other people in their lives who need them. There are no advertisements here. There is no algorithm payment funding this work. What keeps these messages going out is the generosity of people who believe that chosen ones need a place to come and be reminded of who they are. If this content has been a lifeline for you in this season, if you have found yourself returning to these messages in the moments when the silence felt too heavy, and you needed to be reminded that God had not forgotten you, then consider supporting what we are doing here. The donation link is in the pinned comment and in the description below. Whatever you are able to give, it goes directly into keeping this work alive and keeping these words reaching the people who need them most. And if giving is not where you are right now, then, like this video, share it with one person who is in a hidden season and subscribe so that you never miss the next message. Your presence here matters more than you know. Your comment below is seen. Your name in this community is known. And the fact that you are still here, still listening, still pressing in, even in the middle of a season that has asked so much of you, it tells heaven something powerful about the kind of chosen one you are becoming. The concealment is not the end of your story, it is the making of it. There is a moment that comes in the life of every chosen one that is unlike any other moment they have ever faced. It is not the moment of the attack, though the attacks have been fierce. It is not the moment of the betrayal, though the betrayals have cut deeper than anything else could have reached. It is not even the moment of the loss, though the losses have been the kind that reshape a person from the inside out. The moment that tests the chosen one more profoundly than any of those is the moment when God goes quiet. Not the world, not the people around you, God. The prayers that used to feel like conversations begin to feel like messages sent into an empty room. The scriptures that once came alive with personal meaning begin to feel like words on a page that belong to someone else's story. The sense of divine presence that you had come to rely on, that quiet inner knowing that He was near, that warmth that settled over you in the moments of worship and surrender, it recedes. And what is left in its place is a silence is so complete, vast, so unlike anything you have encountered before, that the only honest word for it is terrifying. And in that terrifying silence, every fear you have ever carried about your relationship with God comes flooding to the surface. The fear that you imagined the whole thing, the fear that you were never as close to Him as you thought you were, the fear that something you did, some sin you cannot even identify, some failure you cannot even name, has created a distance between you and heaven that your prayers cannot bridge. The fear that the calling you have been holding on to through every difficult season was never real to begin with, and that this silence is God's way of finally telling you the truth. Those fears are lies, every single one of them, but they do not feel like lies when you are inside the silence. They feel like the most honest thing you have ever heard. This is the test that God reserves for the chosen ones He trusts the most. It is not a test of your knowledge of Scripture, though Scripture will be your anchor through it. It is not a test of your theological understanding, though your theology will be stretched and deepened by it. It is a test of one thing and one thing only, It is a test of whether you will trust him when you cannot feel him, whether you will remain faithful to what he said in the light when you are standing in the dark, and the memory of the light is all you have to hold on to. The prophet Elijah understood this silence. He was a man who had called fire down from heaven. He had stood before kings and spoken without flinching. He had witnessed some of the most dramatic demonstrations of divine power recorded in the entire history of the faith. And yet in 1 Kings chapter 19, after the greatest victory of his prophetic career, Elijah found himself under a tree in the wilderness, so overwhelmed by the silence and the weight of what he was carrying that he asked God to let him die. "It is enough. Take my life. I am no better than my fathers." This was not a man without faith. This was one of the most faith-filled human beings who ever lived. And yet he was brought to his absolute limit by a season where the victory had passed and the presence felt distant, and the road ahead looked like more than he had the strength to walk. And what did God do in that moment? He did not rebuke Elijah for his honesty. He did not withdraw further because of the declaration of exhaustion. He sent an angel to touch him and to say, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." God met the prophet in his collapse, not with condemnation, but with provision. Not with a theological lecture about why the silence was necessary, but with bread and water, and the simple, profound instruction to get up and keep going, because what lies ahead requires more strength than what you currently have, and I am going to give it to you. That is, the God who is present in your silence right now, not a God who has retreated because he is disappointed in you. Not a God who is testing you from a cold distance to see whether you will pass or fail, but a God who is so intimately acquainted with the weight of what you are carrying that he knows exactly what you need in this moment, and he is already in the process of providing it, even when you cannot see or feel the provision coming. The silence of God is not the absence of God. This is perhaps the most important thing a chosen one can learn in a lifetime of walking with him. The silence is a form of presence. It is the presence of a God who has decided that what he wants to do in you in this season cannot be accomplished through the kind of interaction you are used to. It requires a different kind of engagement. It requires you to go looking for him in places you have not thought to look before. In the stillness instead of the activity, in the waiting instead of the doing, in the surrender instead of the striving. And when you go looking in those places, when you press past the fear that the silence means abandonment and lean into it instead of pulling away from it, you discover something that the comfortable seasons never could have shown you. You discover that he was there the entire time, that the silence was not empty, that it was full of a kind of presence that is deeper and quieter and more solid than the dramatic encounters you were looking for. The kind of presence that does not need to announce itself. The kind that simply is underneath everything, holding everything, sustaining everything, even when every sensation tells you that you are alone. The psalm writer walked through this valley. He described it in the 23rd Psalm, not as a place where God was absent, but as a place where God was so close that the rod and the staff, instruments of guidance and correction and protection, were a comfort rather than a threat. The darkest valley in the psalm is not the place where God disappears. It is the place where his nearness becomes more tangible than it has ever been in the easier terrain. But you only discover that by walking through it, not by standing at the entrance and deciding the darkness is too deep to enter. You have to keep walking, even when the silence is so complete that your footsteps feel like the only sound in the universe, even when the prayers feel like they are dissolving before they reach the ceiling. Even when the faith that once felt effortless now feels like something you are choosing with your will rather than feeling with your heart. That choosing, that raw and sometimes desperate act of deciding to believe when everything in your natural senses is telling you there is nothing to believe in, that is the purest form of faith that exists. And it is the kind of faith that moves heaven in ways that the easy seasons never required. The book of Lamentations chapter 3 verse 26 says this: "It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord," not just to wait quietly, to hold the silence as a posture of expectation rather than a symptom of abandonment. To sit in the stillness and say, "I do not understand what is happening right now, but I know who is in charge of it, and I know that what He has promised He is faithful to perform, and I will wait here in this quiet place until He moves because I trust Him more than I trust what I can see and feel right now." That declaration, spoken in the middle of the silence rather than after it has lifted, is the declaration that breaks something open in the spiritual realm. Not immediately, not always dramatically, but something shifts when a chosen one decides to praise God for the silence instead of demanding that it end. Something moves when you stop fighting the stillness and start inhabiting it with trust. Heaven takes notice, and the God who seemed quiet begins to show you that He was never far. He was right here in the silence, waiting for you to find Him in it. You are closer than you think. Keep walking. You have walked through the silence. You have pressed through the season of concealment. You have held your mouth closed when everything in you wanted to speak, and you have trusted God in the darkness when the darkness felt final. And now, in this moment, something is beginning to shift. Not because the external circumstances have necessarily changed, not because the situation that required your silence has resolved itself or the people who misunderstood you have suddenly come to clarity. The shift is happening inside you. And it is the kind of shift that cannot be manufactured, cannot be rushed, and cannot be faked. It is the shift that only comes from having walked through the fire and discovered that you did not burn. There are specific words that heaven has been holding space for. Not the words you wanted to say in the middle of the pain. Not the declarations you rehearsed in your head during the long nights when the silence felt unbearable. Not the explanations you crafted in the quiet moments when you were certain that if you could just say the right thing to the right person, everything would finally make sense to them. Those words belonged to a version of you that was still operating from a place of need. A version of you that required external validation to feel secure in the calling God had placed on your life. The words heaven is holding space for are different. They come from a different place entirely. They are not born from the wound. They are born from the healing. They are not constructed from the urgency of someone who needs to be understood. They are released from the settled place of someone who has been so thoroughly held by God in the silence that they no longer need the room to agree with them in order to stand tall in what they carry. These are the words that carry weight when they land. These are the declarations that shift atmospheres because they are not coming from human striving. They are coming from divine alignment. And what God is looking for right now, what He has been patiently and purposefully cultivating through every season of silence and every moment of concealment and every test of faith you have walked through, is a mouth that He can fully trust, a voice that has been surrendered enough, refined enough, and rooted enough in Him that when He places words in it, those words will go exactly where He intends them to go and do exactly what He intends them to do, without the distortion that unhealed wounds and unprocessed emotions and premature urgency introduce. The book of Isaiah, chapter 50, verse 4 says this: "The Lord God has given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season to him who is weary. He awakens me morning by morning. He awakens my ear to hear as the learned." The tongue of the learned. Not the tongue of the loud, not the tongue of the most confident, or the most persuasive, or the most theologically articulate. The tongue of the one who has been taught, the one who has sat in the classroom of silence long enough to receive instruction that the noisy seasons could never have delivered. Morning by morning. This is not a one-time download. This is a daily practice of returning to the place of listening before the place of speaking. This is the discipline of a chosen one who understands that the words they are being entrusted with are too significant to be delivered on yesterday's revelation. Every morning is a new awakening. Every day is a fresh opportunity to return to the stillness, to let God tune your ear before He opens your mouth, to receive what heaven wants to release through you before you step into the conversations and the rooms and the relationships that your day contains. Think about what it would mean for your life if every word you spoke today had been filtered through that kind of morning encounter. If every response you gave to a difficult situation had been held up first against the question of what God wanted to say through you, rather than what your history wanted to say through you. If every declaration you made about your own life had been received from heaven first, rather than generated from your own assessment of what you see around you. The words that would come out of a life lived that way would be extraordinary, not because of your natural ability or your intellectual capacity, but because they would be carrying something beyond you. They would be carrying the wisdom, the timing, and the precision of a God who knows the end from the beginning and who is working all things together for a purpose that your natural mind cannot fully comprehend. That is the mouth God is building in you. That is the voice that is being prepared in the silence and is almost ready. But almost ready still requires something from you. It requires the specific posture of surrender that the chosen one must take before God releases the fullness of what He has placed in them. It is not a complicated posture. It is not a long list of conditions to meet or requirements to fulfill. It is one thing. It is the willingness to say, "Not my words, Lord, but yours. Not my timing, but yours. Not my agenda, but yours. Use my mouth for what you intended it for, and I will trust that what you release through it will accomplish what you sent it to accomplish." That surrender is not weakness. It is the most powerful thing a human being can offer to God, because it is the surrender of the one thing that human beings hold most tightly. Your voice is your identity. It is the way you assert your presence in the world, the way you defend your existence, the way you shape the narrative of your own life. To hand that to God, to say that you trust Him with the one instrument that feels most essentially yours, is an act of faith so profound that heaven responds to it in ways that go far beyond what you can currently see. And here is what that surrender unlocks. When your mouth is fully surrendered to God, when He knows that you will not speak until He speaks through you, He begins to fill you with things to say that you could not have generated on your own. Insights that cut confusion with a precision that surprises even you. Words of comfort that reach people in places that no amount of human empathy alone could access. Declarations over your own life that are not wishful thinking, but prophetic. Alignment. Words that are calling the reality God has ordained into the present moment from the future He has already secured. This is the inheritance of the chosen one who learned to shut their mouth, not permanent silence, not a life of never being heard, but a life where every word counts because every word has been weighed and tested and released at the right moment by a God who wastes nothing and times everything perfectly. Right now, in this moment, God is asking you to make the surrender real, not theoretical, not something you agree with in principle while holding on to control in practice. A real, tangible, in this moment act of laying your voice down before Him and saying, I trust you with this. I trust you with what I say and what I do not say. I trust you with how I am perceived and how long it takes for the truth about me to be known. I trust you with the timing of my release and the words you will put in. My mouth, when the season of silence has accomplished everything you sent it to accomplish. If that surrender is happening in you right now, if something in your spirit is responding to this invitation and saying yes, then let heaven and this community witness it. Type the words I surrender in the comments below, not as a performance, not to be seen by people, but as a real declaration before God, a line drawn in the spirit that says, from this moment forward, my voice belongs to you. Let the act of typing those words be the first words you release in full surrender, an offering of the very instrument God has been asking you to lay down. You are standing at the threshold of something new, and the door is open. There is a testimony that belongs to you that has not been written yet. It exists in the future, on the other side of everything you are currently walking through, and it is more powerful than anything you could craft from where you are standing right now. It is the testimony of someone who went through the silence and did not break, who walked through the concealment and did not become bitter, who held their mouth closed when the pressure to speak was almost unbearable, and who discovered on the other side of that obedience that God had been doing something so precise, so intentional, so breathtakingly specific in the hidden place, that no human plan or human timeline could have produced what He produced in the quiet. But before that testimony is written, there are those who have already walked this road, those who have already come through the season you are in right now, and who are standing on the other side of it with the evidence of God's faithfulness written all over their lives. And their stories are not just encouragement. They are prophetic mirrors. They are heaven's way of showing you what is possible when a chosen decided to trust God with their silence and wait for the release that only He can orchestrate. Think about the story of a woman who had spent 14 years building a career that looked impressive from the outside and felt hollow from the inside. She had the title and the income and the recognition that the world told her she should want. And every morning she woke up with a weight on her chest that no amount of professional success could lift. She had been speaking the language of ambition for so long that she had completely lost the ability to hear the quieter language of her own calling. And then the silence came, not by her choosing. A sudden loss, a collapse of the structure she had built her identity around, and overnight the noise that had been drowning out God's voice for over a decade was gone. For months she sat in that silence, and it was the most disorienting experience of her life. She did not know who she was without the title. She did not know how to exist without the performance. She did not know how to pray because she had spent so long telling God what she needed rather than listening to what He had been trying to say. But slowly, in the stillness, something began to emerge. A clarity she had not felt since childhood, a sense of direction that did not come from her own analysis or anyone else's advice, but from a place deep inside her that she had forgotten existed. And out of that silence came a completely new chapter, a calling she had been carrying since before she could name it, finally finding its expression in the world, not because she forced it into being, but because the silence had finally cleared enough space for it to breathe. That is what God does in the hidden season. He does not just remove the noise. He uses the absence of noise to reveal what has been there all along, buried under the layers of performance and striving and the exhausting effort of trying to build something meaningful out of human effort alone. Think about another story. A man who had spent years in a relationship that slowly, quietly, methodically dismantled his sense of self. By the time it ended, he did not know what he thought, what he felt, or what he believed anymore. His voice had been so consistently overridden and invalidated and redirected that he had stopped trusting it entirely. And the silence that followed the end of that relationship felt less like freedom and more like standing in a room where all the furniture had been removed and you could finally see how damaged the walls were. He spent a long time in that room, longer than he expected, longer than the people around him thought was necessary. But in that time, in that long and uncomfortable season of being still and being quiet and letting God do the renovation work that only becomes possible when you stop rushing to fill the empty spaces with new furniture, something remarkable began to happen. His voice came back, not the voice that had been shaped by the need for approval or the fear of conflict. His actual voice, the one God had given him before the world, had spent years trying to edit it into something more convenient. And when he finally began to speak again, from that recovered and restored and God-given voice, people leaned in, because what was coming out of him carried the unmistakable signature of something that had been through the fire and come out refined rather than destroyed. These are not fairy tales. These are the patterns of God's faithfulness repeated across thousands of lives, across centuries of human history, across every culture and every context where a chosen one has been willing to go through the silence rather than around it. And the thread that runs through every single one of these stories is the same. The silence was not the end. The silence was the preparation. And what came after the silence was so much more than what existed before it that the people who walked through it would tell you, with complete honesty, that they would not trade the hidden season for anything. Not because it was easy, but because of what it produced in them that nothing else could have. The book of Romans chapter 5 verses 3 through 4 carries one of the most profound sequences in all of Scripture. It says this, "We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character, and character produces hope." Glory in the sufferings, not endure them, not survive them. Glory in them. Because the chosen one who understands what suffering is producing in them does not experience it the same way as the person who sees it, only as an obstacle. They experience it as a workshop, as a furnace, as the necessary environment for the development of something in them that cannot be produced any other way. Perseverance produces character, not talent, not gifting, not opportunity. Character, the deep, settled, unshakable quality of a person who has been tested and has not broken, who has been pressured and has not compromised, who has been silent when they wanted to speak and still, and patient when they wanted to move, and who has come through that experience with a rootedness and a stability and a clarity of identity that makes them extraordinarily difficult to manipulate, deceive, or derail. That is what God is building in you through this silence, not just a better version of who you were before. A fundamentally different kind of person. The kind of person whose character is strong enough to hold the weight of what God is about to place on their life. Because here is the reality that the chosen one must reckon with. The blessing without the character to hold it is not a blessing. It is a burden. The platform without the roots to sustain it is not an opportunity. It is a trap. The open door without the integrity developed in the hidden season to walk through it with wisdom is not an advancement. It is an exposure. And God loves you too much to give you what you are praying for before you have become the person who can steward it without being destroyed by it. So the silence was not cruelty. It was kindness. The hiddenness was not punishment. It was protection. The long season of holding your mouth closed and waiting and trusting and pressing through the fog, without the comfort of feeling His presence or hearing His voice, that season was the most loving thing God could have done for you, because it was building in you the character that your destiny requires. And now, look at where you are. Look at how far you have come from the person who first heard the command to shut your mouth and felt the weight of what that would require. You are not the same person who began this journey. The silence has done its work in you. The concealment has produced its fruit. The fire has refined what needed refining and burned away what was never meant to remain. And what is left, what is standing after all of it, is the truest and most powerful version of you that has ever existed. The version that God always saw when He looked at you. The version that was always there, waiting to be uncovered by exactly this process. Your testimony is being written right now, in the silence, in the stillness, in the choosing to trust when trust is the hardest thing available. And when it is finished, when God releases you into the fullness of what He has been preparing you for, what you carry into that next season will be the undeniable, unshakable, irrefutable evidence of a God who never wastes a moment of the silence He asks His chosen ones to walk through. You are almost there. Do not stop now. You have arrived at a moment that was always waiting for you. Not the end of something, but the threshold of everything. Every section of this message, every word that landed in the places inside you that needed to be reached, every moment where something stirred in your spirit and you recognized that this word was not coincidental, it was all moving you toward this, toward a crossroads where you stand with a clearer understanding of who you are, what God has been doing in your silence, and what He is calling you to step into now with your mouth surrendered, your roots deepened, and your character forged by everything the hidden season demanded of you. You were never meant to stay in the silence forever. The silence was always a preparation, never a destination. And the chosen one who has walked faithfully through the concealment, who has held their peace when holding it cost them something real, who has trusted God in the darkness and pressed through the fog of His apparent quietness without abandoning their post. That chosen one is standing right now at the edge of a release that their natural mind cannot fully calculate. Because what God releases from a surrendered life is not what you could have produced on your own. It is something that carries His signature so clearly, so unmistakably, that no one who witnesses it will be able to credit it to your effort or your talent or your strategy. They will know that what happened to you happened because God stepped in. And that testimony will reach further and last longer and transform more lives than anything you could have manufactured in your own strength during all the seasons you were wishing the silence would end. The book of Jeremiah, chapter 29, verse 11, carries words that you have possibly heard before, but hear them again now from where you are standing. After everything this message has walked you through, it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." He knew. Before the silence came, He knew what it would produce. Before the concealment began, He had already seen what would emerge from it. Before the test of His own quietness pressed against your faith and asked you whether you would still trust Him when you could not feel Him, He had already written the chapter, that comes after the test. The plans were never in jeopardy. The future was never uncertain from his perspective, only from yours. And the invitation he extended to you through every difficult moment of this journey was the invitation to bring your perspective into alignment with his, to see what he sees, to trust what he knows, to rest in the certainty of a future that is already secured even when the present feels anything but certain. That is the posture you are stepping into now. Not the posture of someone who is still waiting to find out if God is faithful, but the posture of someone who knows, who has walked through enough of the hard places to have the experiential, personal, undeniable knowledge that God does not abandon his chosen ones in the sidelines. He meets them there. He forms them there. He does the most important work of their lives there, and he brings them out of there with something that the easy seasons never could have given them. Before we close this time together, there is something that feels right and necessary, and that is to pray. Not a formal or distant prayer, but the kind that rises from exactly where you are right now, from the place where this message has met you today. So if you are willing, receive these words as a prayer spoken over your life in this moment. Father, I bring before you the chosen one who has been listening to this message today. You know exactly where they are. You know the specific silence they have been walking through, the particular weight they have been carrying, the precise fears that have tried to convince them that the hiddenness meant abandonment. And I ask you right now to let the truth of your word land deeper than any fear has reached. Let them know in the deepest place of their being that you have not been absent in their silence. You have been present in a way that was too profound for noise to contain. Restore to them the confidence of your calling. Renew in them the certainty of your faithfulness. And release over their life right now the declaration that the silence is completing its work, that the season of concealment is producing exactly what you intended, and that what you have planted in them is alive and growing and preparing to break the surface at exactly the moment you have ordained. Give them the grace to hold their peace a little longer if that is what you require, and give them the joy of the surrender that they are offering you today. Let their voice, when you release it, carry the unmistakable weight of everything this season has built in them. In your name, with full trust in your faithfulness, this is the prayer we offer together. And we receive the answer before we can see it, because that is what faith is, and that is who we are choosing to be. If that prayer touched something real in you, if it named something you did not have words for before this moment, then you already know that you did not find this message by accident. You were brought here. And the community of chosen ones that gathers around these messages, the people who are in their own seasons of silence and concealment and learning to trust God with their voice, that community exists here on this channel, and it is a place you are always welcome to return to. This channel exists for one reason alone: to reach the chosen ones at exactly the moment they need to be reached. There is no advertising here. There is no platform revenue funding these messages. What keeps this work going is something far more personal than any monetization arrangement. This channel is no longer enabled for monetization, but we have chosen to keep creating because we believe these messages need to continue reaching the right people at the right moment. If you want to help keep this journey going, if you feel led to partner with what God is doing through this platform, you can support us through a voluntary donation using the link placed in the description or in the pinned comment below. We are grateful for every act of support, every prayer offered on behalf of this work, and every share that carries these words to someone who needs them. Whatever you are able to give, it is received with a full heart and used with purpose and care. And if giving is not where you are in this season, please know that your presence here is already a contribution. The most important thing you can do right now, if this message has moved something in you, is to share it. Send it to the person in your life who is in a silent season and does not know how to make sense of it. Post it where someone who is on the edge of giving up on their calling might find it. Let it reach the chosen one who has been wondering if anyone understands what they are walking through. You never know whose entire trajectory changes because you took 30 seconds to share a message that God used to reach them. Like this video so that the platform knows this content matters and shows it to more people who need it. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so that every new message finds its way to you without having to go looking for it. You are part of this community now. And communities grow when their members carry the message beyond themselves. And one more thing, for those of you who have been thinking about the Genius Wave since it was introduced earlier in this message, the link is still in the pinned comment. The $39 access price, the 90-day guarantee, the 7-minute daily practice that supports the mental clarity your next season requires. It is there, it is waiting. And it is one simple step toward giving your mind the same kind of intentional care that this message has been inviting your spirit into. The pinned comment holds everything you need. You are not leaving this message the same person who arrived at it. Something has shifted. Something has been named that needed a name. Something has been released in the spirit over your life that will continue to unfold in the days ahead, even after this video ends. The silence that God has been asking you to walk through is not punishment. It is preparation. And the you that emerges from this season will carry something that this world has been waiting for. You are chosen. You are called. You are being prepared for something that only you can carry in the way that only you can carry it. And the God who brought you to this moment has never once taken his eyes off you. Walk forward, your time is coming. May the silence that has felt like absence reveal itself to you as the most intimate presence you have ever known. May every word you have held back in obedience return to you, multiplied, refined, and ready for the moment God has been preparing it for. May the concealment that has felt like loss show itself to be the greatest gift of protection you have ever received. And may you step out of this season not just surviving but transformed, not just intact but crowned, not just chosen in name but fully alive in the power and the purpose and the unshakable identity of everything God declared over you before you took your first breath. You are God's chosen one, and heaven is watching you with great expectation.